Well, as you can see, I've modified my router boss. I've raised the DRO up to my eye level, and I've made a place for a homemade clipboard to set. My plan has two sections, a green section which is my DRO measurements and a red section which are my print measurements. I'm mostly interested in the green DRO dimensions when I'm cutting my mortises. If I want to check that they're in the right place, then I'll verify them against the red dimensions. As you can see from the upper print here, the mortise that begins at letter F starts at 15.685 on the DRO and ends at 16.935 at F sub 1. That's what I'll use to cut my mortise. I can verify it then with my print dimensions and see whether or not I actually have the mortise in the place that print calls for. So now that I'm all set up, we're going to talk a little bit about mounting the work to the router boss. As you can see here, we're looking at the mortise table, and the clamp is partially disassembled because I want to show you that I use a star washer, one of those jagged little washers between my knob and the aluminum clamp. And what that does is that prevents slippage when I lock it down. Now I've also got the shop-made stop that I showed you in the tenoning video, and I'm going to use it to provide a stop for the rail that I'm going to be cutting mortises in. I've set the stop so that it's going to position the workpiece where there's a solid spine behind it. I don't want to put it over the open area and clamp it there because I'd be pushing against empty space. So I can slide my rail in, as you see, and it will bump quite securely against my shop. Again, the back rail gives full support to it when I push my aluminum clamp up and put pressure against it. So I'll orient this so that it's somewhere towards this end of the rail, and then I'm going to lock those knobs down, and the little star washer that I showed you is going to keep it from slipping now that I'm going to put a screwdriver on that clamp and apply a little pressure. If that weren't there, you probably notice that your clamp will slip and slide backwards. The star knob is going to prevent that. So I've got the rail in there and I'm holding it down in place and I'm screwing the clamp securely. Now I'm going to traverse the mortise table so that I can access the clamp on the other end of my rail and secure it in a similar fashion to what I did on this end. So once I get it to where it's clear, I'll hold the work in place again, and then having screwed down the clamp tightly with my knobs, I'm going to now use my screwdriver to clamp the workpiece down at this end. Again, it's against the solid spine and it's going to be securely held. This is showing us how we're going to set the depth stop. Now there are numerous ways to do this, and I'm going to show you how I do it just using simple gauge blocks. I find that very quick. So I'll bring the router bit down to the top surface of my workpiece, and then I'm going to bring the depth stop down to whatever series of gauge blocks I decide to use. In this case, my mortise is 5/8 of an inch deep, and so I'm using 5/8 of an inch in combination gauge blocks, and I'm locking my depth stop to that. Okay, let's go ahead and proceed to zeroing the x-axis. What that means is I'm going to plunge my router bit down and move the work surface, the leading edge there, into my router bit and get a reference. Then I'm going to set my DRO to 0 and follow that by moving the mortise table 1/8 of an inch. My bit's 1/4 of an inch, so by moving the table 1/8 of an inch, I am theoretically going to have the center line of my bit lined right up with the edge of my workpiece. You may choose to do this differently, and however you do it, this will just give you a starting point or an idea of how of how I do it. This isn't the only way to do this. You may like the leading edge of your bit or the trailing edge of your bit or any other way. Now I'm just going to plunge the bit and see that I've got what appears to be the center line of my bit on the leading edge of the workpiece. Let's proceed to zeroing the y-axis now. That's the in and out or the north-south axis. What we're going to do is plunge the router bit behind the workpiece, touch the back face of the workpiece and get a reference point, and then that will be the 0 setting on the DRO. The next thing you're going to do is pull the router boss towards you, whatever distance your print calls for. Mine wants 1/8 of an inch of a wall between the edge of my mortise and the outside edge of the workpiece. So my bit is a 1/4 inch plus the 1/8 inch of the wall. That means I'm going to set my DRO to 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to pull the router towards me until I read 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to lock the router down so that it can't move from that setting. Okay, it's fun time again. It's time to make some chips fly, so let's cut the mortise. What I've done is I've traversed the workpiece until my DRO gives me a reading of 1.780. That's where I'm going to start my first cut. I'm using the 1/4 inch upcut spiral bit from Craftsman Gallery. It's an excellent bit and it gives very clean cuts. I'm going to go ahead and plunge my first cut in a series of 3 or 4 easy plunges so as not to stress either the bit or the workpiece. Once I've reached the full depth, and I'll know that because my stop on the router will not let me go any deeper, I'm at full depth, then what I'll do is release the plunge bar and traverse the workpiece until I come to the second dimension that my print calls for. As soon as I hit that on the DRO, I'm going to go ahead and make another series of 3 or 4 easy plunges and go to full depth again. Now it's just a simple matter of approximating 1/8 to a 3/16 of an inch depth, and then doing seesaw or back and forth cuts from left to right and right to left, removing a small amount of waste at each cut. With a 1/4 inch bit, I would never attempt to cut that entire mortise in one pass. I think you'll regret it if you do. So with some easy cuts, it only takes about 30 seconds, and I've got a mortise that's completely routed. If you notice, the sidewalls are very clean. That's going to be a nice glue surface. It's a very precisely cut mortise that you don't have to be ashamed of. Now that I turned the router off, we can take a peek at that mortise and see what it looks like, and I think you'll be very pleased with it, and it's not something you're going to have to hide and quickly cover up. Well, there you are. Nice clean mortise with clean sidewalls that'll give a good strong glue joint for the tenon. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of those joints and take just a minute to do that. Here they are. I've removed them from the router boss. You can see all 7 of those mortises spaced very precisely and nice clean sidewalls, no blowouts on that inner 1/8 inch sidewall. Once again, my name is Frank Muchler. I'm one of the Router Boss guys, and I want to thank you for watching this video and invite you to look at the rest of them that are here on our website. Hope to see you around the forum.